The LG C series OLED has been one of my top picks for, well, since the C6 came out, so about 5 years running. Will the C1 continue to carry the torch? We're about to find out. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and today we're reviewing the LG C1 OLED TV. Historically, the C series just ticks all the right boxes. It's got the primo processing, attractive design, now there's HDMI 2.1 in all 4 ports, and it's priced lower than much of its competition, although Vizio is now giving LG a run for its money in the affordability department. We're gonna dive in, see what's the same, what's different, reveal some performance metrics, and ultimately decide if this is, once again, a must-have TV for the year. Let's get into it. Before we get started, how low do you think the C1's price will go this year? We've actually seen some TV prices go up lately due to supply chain troubles. Let me know what you think in the comments, and while you're down there, please click like and subscribe because the more love you show, the faster we'll grow. And as always, we'll have shopping links down in the description if you'd like to support our channel that way. Also, quick shout out to my nephew and niece, Henry and Nora, who like watching these videos on their own LG OLED. Hey guys! Okay, thanks for indulging me. Let's do this. So, as I mentioned in the unboxing video, some things have changed and some are exactly the same. The TV's design is the same as last year's C10 OLED, and we're still getting 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs, but we do have the newly designed remote, which no longer wobbles when you put it down, and has discrete buttons for the Google Assistant and Amazon's Alexa down at the bottom. Frankly, most of what's new is actually inside. And by that, I mean that the C1 has the latest Alpha 9 Gen 4 picture processor inside, which is the driving force behind picture quality elements that go beyond the traits of OLED pixels. And there's a refreshed WebOS platform that looks a lot better, acts a little slower, but is also a bit easier to understand. One of the new platform's best features is actually gaming-centric. We saw that in the G1 as well, but we'll revisit that once we get to gaming on this TV. One thing I discovered as I got to using this TV a bit more was this kind of shady thing that I glossed over in the G1 review, where the TV starts playing free internet TV content like CSI or Star Trek TNG. That's not so weird. What is odd, though, is once you watch for about 30 seconds or so, the TV tells you if you want to continue watching, you need to download the Pluto app. Pluto is a fine app, but I don't dig the way this feels like a bait and switch. I don't know, maybe I'm just whining. It's just that smart TVs are already throwing a lot of ads and suggested content at us, and this doesn't feel right. Otherwise, living with this TV is going to be a pretty good experience for most folks. I still appreciate that LG's OLEDs let you know when you're watching HDR and Dolby Vision and/or Dolby Atmos. It's just a nice confirmation. And if you're integrating the TV with other smart home devices, it's got a pretty great home screen for that too. Just a bunch of thoughtful touches that sometimes we don't spend a lot of time talking about. Now, let's talk about sound quality. The C1 sounds totally decent. It has more bass than I recall the C10 having. In fact, the fidelity overall is just better. And there were a couple of scenes where I felt like the standard sound mode's virtual surround effects were pretty convincing. One of the things that I think really helps the TV out for sound quality is the brushed metal stand scoop, which reflects sound from the TV's downfiring speakers at the listener. I also played around with AI Sound Pro a little more, and I can't explain why, but it sounds better here than it did with the G1 OLED. So who knows? Bottom line is the TV sounds solid, but a quality soundbar is going to be better and befitting the picture quality. Speaking of picture quality, we'll paint some broad strokes shortly, but first let me appease my Nit Nerds out there. Yes, I just made that up, and I say it affectionately. A nit, for those of you just joining us here, is a measure of brightness, and since there's a bit of a nit war going on, everyone wants to have a big nit number to hint at their superior HDR prowess. I figure I'd tell you what kind of results I got when measuring the TV. I started with the ISF Bright Picture preset, calibrated the 2-point white balance, which had me pulling out quite a bit of red, actually, and in SDR with the default OLED brightness setting of 80 and peak brightness left turned off, I got 195 nits. When I turned up the OLED pixel brightness to 100, I got 233 nits, and when I set the peak brightness setting to high, I got 335. So really, it just depends on how bright you want your TV to be in SDR, and I know that a lot of folks watching in rooms with a lot of daylight coming in might want to juice things up. In HDR, I found I had to correct the white balance a bit more, but once that was done, I got 750 nits steady in up to a 25% window, which is solid. Not as bright as the LG G1 or Sony A90J, but what I expected based off what we got last year. Color measurements before calibration, like right out of the box, were pretty good. There was actually a little too much red in SDR and a little bit too much blue in HDR. That was easy enough for me to correct, so the color measurements after calibration were very good, as they always are. And that bears out in the picture quality, which, let's just get to it, it's superb. I somehow forget just how much I like this series of OLEDs from LG. It gets me every time. If you want to see just how great it can look, well, I have a broad list of suggested 4K Blu-rays I would recommend actually, but for something accessible to everyone, check out Our Planet on Netflix. It is gorgeously shot and mastered and looks excellent in Dolby Vision. It's a feast of beauty for your eyes, and it will definitely impress your friends. This TV gets just about everything right. It's bright enough to do HDR justice. It has perfect blacks, which I cannot stress enough have a huge impact on the overall image. The color is deep and rich and vibrant. It doesn't really matter what you watch, the LG C1 OLED will make it look just about the best it can and do it at a more accessible price than most other OLED TVs. Much of that has to do with the Alpha 9 Gen 4 processor, but little of it ended up having to do with the AI picture options because frankly, I didn't really need them. I turned them on, I saw some improvement to some objects, but it wasn't a wholly transforming experience. I think what's important is that the upscaling is good, though not a miracle worker, as we've discussed. The HDR tone mapping is also excellent. I mean, top to bottom, the images just look great. Now, we do have to talk about a couple of issues you might run into around motion and shadow detail. Let's tackle motion first. All TVs with high brightness capabilities and fast response times can introduce a stutter effect. That's stutter, not judder. This TV does fine with playing back 24 frame per second content from a cadence standpoint. Should probably make a video about the differences. Anyway, the stutter issue has to do with how long a TV has to hold an image before it displays the next frame. Another way of looking at it is, what kind of gap is there between the TV's response time and the next frame that comes along from the content? Ironically, the best TVs tend to have the most problem with stutter because they have awesome response times and high peak brightness. So the effect comes off as a sort of flashing that draws your attention to it and away from the object of focus. You definitely tend to notice it. This is where a trade-off comes into play. You can either put up with the stutter or you can use motion smoothing to cancel it out, but also get soap opera effect. Most of you don't mind soap opera effect apparently, so whether this is a downside for you comes down to that. Second issue is shadow detail, or another way of looking at it could be crushed blacks. Crushed blacks is kind of a misleading term because it's actually very dark gray that is getting crushed, and it isn't really getting crushed, it's just not showing up. Stuff that should be darker gray tends to be black on an OLED because OLED materials don't like to light up at extremely low voltages. Fortunately, LG has a compensation for that which you can manipulate so you get better shadow detail at the expense of raised blacks or better black levels at the expense of shadow detail. This issue probably impacts gamers the most. So let's move on to gaming, shall we? I think I can be pretty succinct here. The C1 is fantastic for most gaming scenarios. Only LG is arming a good amount of its TVs with 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs. So right there, it's one of the most versatile you can get. You also get FreeSync and G-Sync compatibility. I don't believe any other brand is supporting both yet. The HDR images are fantastic. The input lag is very low. With Game Optimizer boosting the input lag reduction, it's below 10 milliseconds. Also, the Game Optimizer dashboard is a great place to make adjustments to black levels for better shadow detail. And there's even presets for different game genres that works pretty well in my experience. That's just a real comprehensive suite of gamer-friendly features, so it's impossible for me not to call this one of the best TVs for gaming overall. If I run into any major problems, I'll definitely pin a comment and we'll talk through it, but so far, it's been excellent. Overall, the LG C1 has minor improvements over last year's C10 OLED, but some fairly meaningful ones. It's just a very well-balanced TV in terms of performance, and it's one of the more affordable OLEDs you can buy. The LG C1, simply put, is an all-star TV, and it's one of the best we'll see this year. Thanks, as always, for watching, everyone. Did I miss something that you wanted to see covered on this? We still got lots to do with this TV, so let me know about that in the comments. Also, please like and subscribe, and here's 2 other videos that I think you'll like.